You are listening to an interview with clinical hypnotherapist Dr. Steve G. Jones. For a free hypnosis download, please visit stevegjones.com.
Hi, I'm Dr. Steve G. Jones, clinical hypnotherapist, and I'm here with a good friend of mine, Jason Augustus Newcomb. How you doing, Jason?
I'm doing great, Steve.
That is good. That's the enthusiasm we're looking for. And we are riding along Route 66, historic Route 66. Now, we're in a convertible, so there might be a little bit of noise, but we are also, we do not have the top of the convertible down. Move these water bottles.
Steve has made me have to drive, so I may be slightly less coherent because I'm having to deal with stuff on the road.
Yes,
but yet I'm going to be the interviewed one, and he's going to look smarter.
I'm making him drive and talk.
Yeah.
So Jason has been a friend of mine since, I guess, the year 2000 or so.
Yeah, something along those lines.
We both lived in Los Angeles, and
we just getting started on our illustrious careers.
Yeah, it's when everything started to really jump into place for me and really started to pick up. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that, and we're also going to talk about what Jason does. So back in 2000, I had my office in Beverly Hills, and one day I was passing out business cards in a place called Larchmont Park, and I apparently slid one in the door of a business after hours, and
I found it on the ground.
You personally found it?
Yeah.
Okay. And were you working at this business or for this business?
No. We just lived in the neighborhood, and we're walking past, and I said, "Look, there's something on the ground." Oh, Dr. Steve G. Jones, hypnotherapist.
Oh, so
we're hypnotists. How interesting. We just picked it up and put it in our pocket. And if you recall, we didn't call you or anything. We just saw you in a supermarket like a week or two later, and I heard your girlfriend saying, "Steve, blah blah blah, hypnosis," and I was like, I think that's Steve G. Jones, the hypnotist, whose card we found on the ground in Larchmont Village. So we just struck up a conversation, and that's how our friendship began.
Wow. I had forgotten all the details. That's awesome.
Yeah. So had I until just now.
Wow, okay. So Jason, his girlfriend at the time, and my girlfriend at the time, we all became friends, and you were into what you are into now, which is magic. Is that a good summary?
Well, I mean, I was studying hypnosis as well, and yep. I was a hypnotherapist as well, technically at that point. Although I've kind of given up my, certification maintenance at this point. But yeah, I was interested in magic with a K. I'm also sort of interested in magic without a K too. But
now, what's the difference between?
Magic with we refer to something that involves, sort of sleight of hand and trickery and stuff as magic. And then there's also the sort of things that people do spells on each other and stuff like that. And I guess I'm sort of interested in both of those areas. So.
Okay.
But so I mean, at that time I was creating something which is kind of my signature product, which is called the New Hermetics. Which I know you have trouble pronouncing, but
I sometimes call it Hermetics. Now, is Hermeneutics something?
Hermeneutics, or
is that something different, or is that just a word I made up?
I think Hermeneutics isn't a word. No.
Okay, so we'll go with Hermetics from
Hermetics.
now on.
You can. I mean, it's okay if you have to. People do struggle with it from time to time. So.
And what does Hermetics mean?
Okay, well, Hermetic refers to the Greek god Hermes, and it actually is kind of a blanket term that covers everything from sort of alchemy and the practice of worshiping, ancient gods and stuff, all the way down to sort of the New Thought movement. In fact, are you familiar with a book called The Kybalion?
I am not. It's about the Cabal?
No.
Oh wait, no. The Cabal is something from the TV show Blacklist.
Your buddy Joe Vitale would probably know the Kybalion.
Okay.
It's a book written. It's about Hermetics, and it was written right around the turn of the 20th century, and it was actually written by a guy who's quite famous in the New Thought movement. And of course, the New Thought movement is the movement that all of sort of self-help comes out of. It's the, if you can imagine it, you can create it, all that stuff comes out of that movement at the beginning of the 20th century. And there were a lot of guys in that movement who were kind of interested in occultism and magic, because that was actually quite fashionable at that time period.
That was like Aleister Crowley around.
Aleister Crowley was not a part of that, and actually he I don't think he really liked these guys. They were out in California, selling get-rich-quick schemes and stuff like that, and he thought they were a bunch of jerks. But
where was Aleister Crowley living?
He's from England, and I think he lived in New York for a while though.
Okay, so was he of that genre, of that time?
Yeah, he's basically in that time.
But he didn't associate with those.
Not really,
folks.
although some of the people, there definitely is a big crossover between them. Aleister Crowley was kind of like, he's the bad boy. I'm a bad boy of the self-help movement, and he's a bad boy of the magical revival, of the Victorian magical revival. So.
Now, in what way was he a bad boy? And then let's talk about how you're a bad boy.
We're bad boys in very different ways.
Okay. What did he do
Aleister
that
Crowley
was
liked
bad?
pushing people's buttons. He liked to, talk about Satan and stuff in a time when you weren't really, allowed to do that. And he liked to make people think that he was eating babies and stuff. Just publishing stuff where he was saying he was talking in some sort of code to people who were in the know, but he wrote it in such a way that it looked like he was like a crazy demon maniac kind of guy. But I mean, really, he was actually a self-help guy too in a lot of ways. I mean, his agenda was to help people to kind of discover what they really wanted to do and to do it with all their gusto. That was his. But I mean, I don't want to talk about Aleister Crowley too much, but.
Well, I've just heard about him through the Ozzy Osbourne song about.
Sure, yeah, and he talks to the dead.
Is that part true?
I don't really think he did talk to the dead. I don't know.
Now, you and I were talking the other night. You said he was a poet.
Yes, Aleister Crowley was a poet,
and that he would describe himself as a poet.
For sure, that doesn't
sound like a bad boy to me.
Well, I mean, I think you could be a bad boy and a poet back at that time period. It's a very different world they lived in. Where poets were like drunkards and people who they were like beatniks and stuff of their time period. Only I think they called them decadents. So they would they'd drink and eat fine foods and try and find women to have sex with or other men to have sex with. That's another thing that he was famous for, was being bisexual in a time period where you really weren't allowed to openly do that, and he wasn't completely open about it, but he was pretty obvious about the fact that he was having relationships with both women and men. So
wow, so that's he's quite a well-rounded gent, we would say.
Yes.
Now pulling this back to
my life,
to your life, and well, first of all, we want to hear how you're a bad boy. You said it was different than his. Well, and then we want to talk about how this relates to self-help.
Sure. I mean, the reason that I consider myself a little bit of a bad boy is because I kind of openly indulge in occult metaphors that a lot of other self-help people secretly involve themselves with, but they don't openly discuss
like
that kind of stuff.
Let's openly discuss.
just like my interest in astrology, my interest in tarot, my interest in doing rituals to make changes in myself and in the world around me, those sorts of things. Most people will try and kind of disguise that as being just, it's a meditation exercise, or it's a mantra that you're saying to yourself. But I mean, the truth is that all that stuff has its roots in esoteric stuff. So
now, what about raising the dead?
No, I don't really do a lot of raising the dead. The thing about raising the dead is that is something that there's very little purpose in it because they're dead.
Oh, good point.
I mean, I guess if you talk to the dead, as Ozzy Osbourne suggests, maybe you could learn some things that the dead know that you don't know.
Like accidents not to make, like the final thing.
Yeah. When I was driving my car down the highway talking into an iPhone, and that was just before I got run over.
Wait a minute. That's what we're doing right now.
Oh, no! But yeah, there was a very popular movement to contact the dead back in the late 19th century, early 20th century.
Now, do you believe in that? Do you believe in contacting the dead?
Do I believe that it's possible to contact the dead?
Yes.
I mean, I think that it's possible to make contact with something that is outside of your own consciousness and that can relay information. Is that actually a dead person that you knew or didn't know that you're trying to get in touch with? I'm not sure about that. I can't speak to that definitively because I don't all I can subjectively, yes, you can have that experience very, very easily.
Okay.
You know what I'm talking about? I mean, you're a hypnotist. You can hypnotize a person and ask them to do something, and they're going to do it is if someone imagines that they're going to they're going to improve their golf game, so they imagine that they're doing it in hypnosis, and then their golf game improves. They weren't really doing golf during their hypnosis session, but they get some benefit from it. So ultimately, it doesn't really matter. That's my definition of what makes something useful. If you talk to a dead relative or someone who's dead, and they give you some information like don't talk on your iPhone while you're driving down the highway, and that's useful, then that's something that's worth doing. If it's just about sort of making contact to try and see if it's true or not, or that kind of stuff, I don't know that there's any real purpose in that, personally. I think a lot of people who go to mediums and stuff, they're looking for some sort of emotional closure on a relationship that the person passed away before they really felt like they could say goodbye to them, or that sort of thing. And so mediums can provide some sort of a service in that regard. I just think that it's probably something that you could do without charging quite as much as they do a lot of the time. But other than that, I don't have an issue with it.
I agree with your stance on that. I think a lot of things have therapeutic value that may or may not be real, or that the person may or may not believe in, or that the therapist may or may not believe in. Because if you have someone that you're hypnotizing for a past life regression, for example,
sure,
who knows if that thing that they're actually quote unquote remembering
is
actually happened? Yeah, we don't really know that unless we were to do a lot of research. But I imagine it has cathartic, therapeutic value for them. They can release some feelings that they have about something.
Sometimes it does. Sometimes it doesn't. I've been involved in quite a few past life regressions, and I've definitely seen times when it's had a therapeutic benefit, and I've definitely seen times when it's seemed more like a tour into the subconscious or the possibly past life of a person. It's hard to say for certain what's going on in a lot of those things. I actually just watched a past life regression yesterday. Honestly, I was at a seminar and they did it in front of the group, and it was a pretty short one, but it was actually quite. I mean, the person started crying in the middle of it. He didn't know what exactly the meaning of it all was, but he definitely had a strong emotional reaction to what he was experiencing. So, I mean, even that can be useful, unless you're just using it to prove to yourself that sort of thing is real because you had an emotional reaction. Then maybe you're getting into sort of more gray territory.
You are listening to an interview with clinical hypnotherapist Dr. Steve G. Jones. For a free hypnosis download, please visit stevegjones.com.
What I do, Steve, is I have basically a bunch of recordings on my website, and they're a part of a kind of a system for approaching things, basically self-help things, but from a more metaphysical angle. And what I think the benefit of that angle is that a lot of our subconscious and our deeper consciousness imprints in our minds come from those esoteric things, whether we realize it or not. For instance, the number 7 is something that's very special to us. Some people are gamblers, some people think it's their lucky number for some other reason, but the number 7, it's a number that's almost universally considered special.
I have heard that. That's actually my favorite number for some reason.
Well, and 7 has been sacred since ancient Babylon. That number has been a significant number throughout our entire history of our culture. And interestingly enough, observably, although we now know that there's some planets you can't see with the naked eye, observably there are exactly 7 objects in the sky that circulate around separate from the sphere of the fixed stars. There's 5 planets that are visible, and the sun and the moon. And so the ancients thought there are 7 special objects in the sky that kind of change the way things are. But I mean, that's possibly coincidence, because the number 7 has a multitude of other things. It's also the only number that you can't, if you try and draw a linear object with 4 sides, you can very easily do it with just a compass and a ruler. If you try and draw an even triangle, you can do that with compass and ruler. The only number up till 10 that you can't do that with is the number 7, because the geometry of it is not a whole number. So you literally can't draw a perfect heptagon or 7-sided object without, complex calculations and difficult actions being done. Whereas the other ones, you can draw an absolutely perfect one. So it's special. It's a special number. It's a prime number. It's a very big fat prime number, and it just has always been considered to be a special number. And I only mention that just because that's something that just is universal in our consciousness. It has nothing to do with any kind of plan or specific religious thing. It's just something that's special. And so my tools, I try and align them with those ancient principles that have just sort of always been there. For instance, four square directions. There's north, south, east, and west, and that's universal. And universally, when we set up a sacred space in almost every culture around the world, we create that sacred space keeping those directions in our minds, and create 4 different sort of special places to place things in your space and to direct your attention to. And there's 4 different kind of energies at those places. If you study Tibetan Buddhism, you see that. If you study Native American religions, you see that. If you study Hermeticism and lodge work from the Middle Ages till now, you see that 4 square energies being honored in what and how we construct a sacred space, or a space that's special. You don't even have to think of it as sacred, a space that we're utilizing as a special workroom for our consciousness. But I mean, if you want to think of it as spiritual, you can too. And so my tools kind of incorporate those ideas into creating a framework for getting yourself together. And within that, there's kind of all the regular stuff: setting goals, having gratitude for where you are now, improving your energy. I've got a bunch of tools for really ramping up your personal energy, your ability to kind of get things done. I've got a bunch of tools for making sort of really nitty-gritty integrated changes in your mind, utilizing some tools like NLP and stuff like that within them to a certain degree, but still focusing in on those categories that we are anciently. I mean, we've one thing that's kind of interesting, Steve. Do you like the Myers-Briggs personality assessment at all? Do you know that at all?
I've taken it a few times. I always forget what I am, but I took it. I took a screenshot this time, so I took it online, and I took like the mini version. I know to do it accurately, you have to take the big test because it cross-checks to make sure you're being truthful the whole way through by
Sure.
asking the same thing in 10 different ways.
In 10 different ways, yeah. The women who designed it were actually students of C.G. Jung, who was a psychotherapist, psychoanalyst, who was a student of Freud's, but who went off in a little bit more of a metaphysical direction. And he was incredibly influenced by the things I'm talking about, alchemy and Kabbalah and those sorts of ideas. And he created a kind of a model for the way that people might approach reality that the Myers-Briggs is based on, the intuition and feeling and those sorts of things. And Myers-Briggs is based pretty closely on C.G. Jung's ideas, which are in turn based pretty closely on the 4 ancient elements and alchemy and stuff. So I mean, something that we use regularly in business for assessing people is actually an alchemical thing. It's actually an occult thing, and yeah, I mean that's probably sacrilege to say that or something, or going to make some people who are more conservative in business be like, we're getting rid of that Myers-Briggs thing.
Or if they've ever taken it, then maybe they've practiced the occult.
They've practiced some magic.
Oh,
yeah,
boy.
Absolutely. So. Yeah, I mean that's kind of where my stuff is at. I've got a lot of recordings based on it, and you can actually go through them in order, and it's kind of a whole self-development program. But you can also pick and choose little ones from it. And, my website's JasonAugustusNewcomb.com. Since you're not going to promote me, I'll just mention it.
I was going to ask before we ended. I would never leave an old friend hanging like that. I was gonna get to that if you didn't. So Jason Augustus Newcomb.
Yes.
.com.
So Jason is obviously that indicates that I'm like a noble mythological warrior, kind of prince hero guy. My mom.
That's what I was thinking too.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think I knew that. I could see it in your eyes.
Even though I'm wearing shades.
Even though you're wearing dark sunglasses. Yeah, it's part of one of my occult abilities is I can see past the sunglasses.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's intense.
Okay.
And Augustus, which is the name of the first Caesar.
So is that from your Italian heritage?
No, it's actually because I was born in August, and my mom was like, "How could I make a cool name that has something to do with where he's born?"
Lucky it wasn't February. It'd be like Februarius.
Yeah, no, it would have been terrible. Sorry, John Februarius. I apologize.
Born at a wrong time.
But it was kind of a magical act, her doing that. My mom and dad were sort of into astrology at the time, and they were wanting to make the name sort of a strong and powerful name that had something to do with the time that I was born.
Oh, so your parents got you into things like this?
In a way, yes, because they both talked about astrology with me a little bit when I was pretty young. And my dad, I didn't grow up with my dad, but when I did see him, on more than one occasion, he actually mentioned astral projection, that he'd had this experience when he was younger, that he was taking a nap and all of a sudden he found himself outside of his body, and he went downtown and he saw a help wanted sign on a building downtown, and then when he came back to his body, he actually got up and went down to that help wanted sign and went and got that job. And so he actually felt like he'd actually had a real encounter with the unseen world, and I think that probably did affect me in some way and bring me in that direction to an extent.
Nice.
So yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing all of that, and once again, your website, it's about 20 letters long, but it's Jason Augustus Newcomb. Now that's a Leo for you.
Newcomb is spelled, it's like Newcomb too, so if people want to try it.
Newcomb.
Yeah.
Newcomb. Yeah. And you've written books as well, and which books have you written?
Well, the book that probably is most related to what I've been talking about is The New Hermetics, and I don't think I really defined Hermetics that well in our conversation.
We'll do that in a future talk. Okay.
Yes,
coming soon. And any other books?
Yes, I've written a book called 21st Century Mage, which is a book about getting in touch with your higher self and really kind of connecting with your real life's purpose and feeling really directed. And that's a very magical book, though.
I think you were working on that when I met you.
No, I might have been working on the Book of Magic Power, which is actually probably in some ways my most successful book. And that's a compendium of everything from psychic development to astral projection to dream programming to animal transformation in dreams, not physically. Although I think I mentioned it possibly as something someone can try and do that, but I've never had any success physically transforming into an animal.
Yeah, that's probably good.
Yeah, no. Yeah, I'm a pass on that one too. But and things like and also some basic ritual magic practices and stuff too. It's a huge book filled with a bunch of stuff. But and then I've also written a book called Sexual Sorcery. We won't talk about that though right now. And then I've written a bunch of other little books too. So
wow, you've been busy.
Yeah.
Well, JasonAugustusNewcomb.com. Thank you for. I was going to say thank you for being here today, but we're actually on this very long road trip on Route 66, and we thought, how can we best spend our time? So we thought we'd do a few podcasts. So there are going to be a few more also after this one. So thank you for being here for this.
I want to mention that the code Steve G. Jones as one word, all capitalized, case sensitive, Steve G. Jones, will give you a 30% discount off of anything on my website.
On JasonAugustusNewcomb.com?
Yes.
Wow.
Until January 2017.
So if
you're listening to this a year from now, sorry.
Yep.
Can't do it forever.
Well, you can always, it'll still be worth it, whatever price you pay for Jason's information, even if you can't get the discount. How much is the discount?
30%.
30%. Wow.
It's a good discount.
Wow.
Not as good as some discounts you've given, but...
yeah, well, So I can use my name also and get a discount?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Well, thank you. JasonAugustusNewcomb.com is the website.
Oh, it only works on downloads, though. Because I got some physical products on there, and I can't afford to do that on them.
Okay. Limited time and limited use.
Sorry, but no, for any download.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I've got like 200 downloads, so,
Wow.
Yeah.
So you can clean Jason out. You get everything he ever made at 30% off.
Yes.
I like that.
And you probably want it all.
Yes. Is that hypnosis?
I mean, it was suggestion.
I liked it. I liked it. I want to go there right now. All right, Jason, thanks. Thanks for, we still have hours and hours to travel here. So we'll be back in another podcast. And
in the future.
yes, thanks for listening.
Thanks for having me, Steve.
Thank you.
You are listening to an interview with clinical hypnotherapist Dr. Steve G. Jones. For a free hypnosis download, please visit stevegjones.com.